The president announced a new 50% tariff on.
Over time, we become too dependent on the United States as our biggest customer, with more than 90% of our steel exports going south of the border.
They use tariffs to take our businesses, not only steel, other businesses too.
We must rely more on Canadian steel for Canadian projects.
$900. That's the new price tag for a ton of U.S. steel tonight. Just a week ago, it was hovering near $700. This wasn't a Wall Street rally. It was the direct result of a single signature. On June 4th, President Trump doubled steel and aluminum tariffs to a punishing 50%. Within hours, Canada, America's most reliable metal source, froze nearly every outbound railcar. Detroit assembly lines felt it first, machines halted, robots froze mid-motion, and night shift paychecks vanished. Meanwhile, across the border, Hamilton's blast furnaces thundered back to life, lighting up Ontario like it was wartime. Then came the counterpunch. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney slammed Trump's move as a self-inflicted wound, an own goal of historic scale, and warned of further retaliation. So, how did a protectionist policy meant to revive U.S. industry end up choking Motor City's lifeline? And who pays the price? Ottawa, Beijing, or Main Street, USA? Let's break it down. June 4th, 2025, Washington. As the city stirred, the new tariff was already in the Federal Register. By lunch, every steel shipment bound for U.S. ports carried a 50% tax, double 2018's rate, enough to cripple half the world's steel producers. Within 12 hours, panic took over. Calls from Cleveland to Monterrey all echoed the same nightmare. Any steel priced under Tuesday's rate would bleed red by Wednesday. Markets responded immediately. On June 5th, Nuor hiked its base quote to $900 per short ton, up nearly $150 in just 2 weeks. For automakers, that's sticker shock in slow motion. A single pickup needs about a ton of steel. Multiply that across 1.5 million F-Series trucks annually, and Ford's material cost balloons by $500 million before welding even starts. But the real quake hit north of the border. Catherine Cobden of the Canadian Steel Producers Association told reporters that U.S. demand collapsed overnight. Translation: Canada's 12 million tons of steel exports to the U.S. just vanished, and so did Detroit's metal feedstock. Prime Minister Carney didn't blink. He labeled the tariff policy a blunder and floated export restrictions on critical minerals. At the same moment, Hamilton's mills fired back up, chasing new contracts in Asia, while Ford's River Rouge plant idled 2 lines due to steel shortages. Wall Street caught the scent. The S&P 500 slid 0.75% by day's end. Traders dubbed it a Trump session teaser. The irony? A tariff wall designed to protect U.S. jobs instead outsourced raw metal, silenced Detroit's robots, and handed Canada control of the entire supply chain. And that was only week 1. Ford's leadership saw it coming. On May 7th, CEO Jim Farley warned that the 50% tariff would add $2.5 billion to the year's costs, forcing Ford to pull its profit forecast. A month earlier, Reuters reported that Mexico-built models could see prices jump up to 25%. That's $2,000 on a midsize SUV. By the weekend, showrooms from Texas to Washington state added temporary surcharges. Factory order banks stalled, but the deepest bruise showed up in Michigan's job numbers. By April 4th, unemployment hit 5.4%, the highest in the country. Economists blamed one thing: no Canadian coil. Each F-150 in Dearborn eats up a ton of steel. At $900 per ton, Ford's River Rouge plant burns through a 6-figure metal tab every 3 minutes. Add that up across the planned truck run: $1.3 billion before a single paycheck or drop of paint. Congress took notice. On July 21st, a group of Great Lakes senators crossed into Ottawa, pleading for relief. But Carney stayed firm, offering only talk of stricter export quotas. Bottom line, a tariff wall meant to protect U.S. factories is starving them instead, and Canada holds the keys. Then came Carney's clean steel masterstroke. On July 16th, Canada announced a $1 billion modernization fund for Ontario's mills. The goal? Replace coal-fired blast furnaces with hydrogen and electric arc units. Hours later, Ottawa sliced the import quotas for non-free trade countries. Once the caps hit, a 50% duty drops, same as the U.S. But here's the twist: Ontario's grid is 93% emissions-free. Hydro and nuclear power keep Hamilton's steel 3 to 4 times cleaner than the global average. That makes Canadian coil a dream fit for Europe's carbon border tax launching in 2026. Arcelor Mittal Dofasco, Hamilton's steel giant, already broke ground on a direct reduced iron plant and dual electric arc furnaces, set to cut emissions by 5 million tons annually. And with natural gas prices stabilizing, Canadian mills will soon outcompete even on cost. Meanwhile, Detroit waits. Every railcar that once rolled south is now booked for Rotterdam or Busan, CBAM certified and EU ready. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario aren't just watching, they're moving. On July 22nd, they signed a pact mandating that every new pipeline or corridor use Ontario melted steel. U.S. mills. Off the bid sheet. The American Iron and Steels Institute says Canada shipped 6.56 million tons of steel to the U.S. last year. Now, every pound is spoken for, either staying home or heading east, skipping U.S. ports entirely. Ottawa tightened the screws again last week, slashing tube and pipe quotas from non-free trade nations by 50%. The effect? U.S. drillers can't source affordable pipe, while Canadian provinces keep the work and the politics in-house. America's stuck. Building new domestic electric resistance weld ERW mills takes years. Rerouting crude by rail adds insurance risk. Meanwhile, Ottawa frames its moves as energy security, and then Europe flipped the switch. On January 1, 2026, the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, goes live, charging foreign steel the same carbon cost paid by European mills, about $90 per ton. But Canada's hydropowered steel, it skates through CBAM's gates. U.S. steel, 63% coal-fired, doesn't. Canadian exports will be green-tagged, U.S. slab, red-flagged. Detroit's loss is Hamilton's gain. According to the Tax Foundation, the average U.S. household will pay $1,296 more this year due to these tariffs, essentially wiping out a month of grocery savings. Trump's tariff fence was meant to shield American jobs, but Europe built a carbon gate that now redirects them. And Carney? He opened Canada's side door with clean power and a $1 billion investment. Now the question, will Washington tear down the tariff wall and chase clean steel, or double down and watch Canada race ahead? Sound off in the comments. Because what started with a single tariff just rewired the entire steel economy.